Things may seem impossible, but there is a way to get things done. And sometimes when things seem impossible, it just takes persistence and determination to make them happen. A few years ago, I went to the country of Nepal and was traveling there with Stephen Burkholder and Clinton Weaver. And I know Paul Reber was along. There was another man or two along, but I don't remember who else was with me on the trip. We flew into Kathmandu and then we drove down to the east-west highway across Nepal, and we stayed somewhere close to Chitwan. I'm not sure where, but we had a driver that had a Jeep and was taking us on this trip. It was a rented vehicle, and we had hired the driver and the vehicle. In the morning, when we got up at Chitwan to head to, we were going to go to Nepal Gunj, which is in western Nepal. It was about a 12-hour drive, and the vehicle wouldn't start. The Jeep wouldn't start. So we pushed it. It started. We were good. We were on our way. But the problem was, Stephen said there are protests in Butwal, which was a town about halfway between where we were and Nepal Gunj. He said, I don't know if we're going to be able to get through because there's hundreds of people in the streets and the roads closed. And it was some dispute over boundaries of a province or a state, and it had nothing to do with foreigners. It was an internal political dispute. So we headed west, and we'll see how far we get. And they were protesting during the day, and then at night they would open up the road so vehicles, traffic could go through at night. But we really wanted to be in Nepal Gunj that night because we had a presentation to make at a church the next morning. So we headed off, and then we got close to Bootwall, and there was a place where the road was closed. There was a tree across the road, people standing there, and there were vehicles parked along the road, people lying on blankets, resting, and got up to the tree, and the men there were saying, "No, you can't go. The road's closed. There's a protest. You can't go through." And Stephen was saying, "Oh, please, we just have this vehicle full of Westerners, and we don't have anything to do with the politics here, and so we really need to get to Nepal Gunj tonight, and so please, you could let us through. Just let us through." And so he kept talking to them, and eventually they lifted the tree, and we went through. Then we got into Bootwall proper, into the city where the protests were, and there were hundreds of people in the streets and protesting, and lots of vehicles parked along the road, along the street, and people lying on blankets resting. And so we went up to, there was an army officer then that stopped us and said, "No, you can't go through. Like, look at all the protests and everything that's happening. Like, there's just no way that you can go through." And so Stephen was talking to the army officer, and they walked off, and there was a whole crowd of people, 50 people around Stephen and the officer. We couldn't even see them, and so we're kind of waiting there. And then Stephen was talking to the officer, and he was saying, "Come on, you can let us through." He said, "I can't. Like, look at what's going on. Like, there's no way you can go through the protests. Like, just look at what's happening here." And Stephen was saying, "Well, you have a boss, you have a supervisor somewhere. You call him and ask him, what can I do for these Westerners that need to get to Nepal Gunj? You could help us." Well, eventually, the army officer called his supervisor, and then Stephen came back and he said, "Okay, they're going to give us a military escort through the protest." So the military jeep came, and there's soldiers on the back with guns and stuff, uh, and then we pile in our vehicle and said, "Okay, let's go." Well, it wouldn't start. So there we are in the middle of a protest, hundreds of people protesting, with a military escort vehicle, a truck in front of us. And there we are, 5 or 6 Westerners pushing our Jeep to get it started in the middle of protest. So we pushed it, it started, and we jumped in, and the army escorted us through the protest. We got to the other side, and there were vehicles waiting to come east. And as our military escort left, and we were driving, and then people flagged us down and said, "Is the road open?" And Steve said, "No, it's not open for you, but we came through." So we got to Nepal Gunj that night, and had our church presentation the next day, and everything went according to plan. It took persistence and determination, but we were able to get through.